Welcome to the WIHS Journal. May is National Foster Care Month. On the broadcast with me today is Helen Richardson from Focus on the Family, who was placed in foster care system at a young age. Today we'll hear all about her story. Before we start talking about this amazing month, just give our listeners a little bit of a background on you.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. My background started, honestly, at an early age. Unfortunately, my parents struggled. They struggled with life choices. They struggled to be able to provide for myself and my older sister. And because of that, we started into care when I was just an infant. And that continued on for a few years. Unfortunately, when I was 3, my father passed away. And then my mom was a single mom doing this and still struggling. So we bounced back and forth between foster care and her care. And then when I was 6, she passed away. And at that point, I transitioned into what's called kinship care, so relative care, and stayed within my mom's family until I was 18. Some of them were wonderful caretakers. Some of them were not. I bounced every year or every couple of years to different family members. And sadly, most of them weren't equipped to deal with a kid from a hard place. They didn't know why I was wired differently, why I acted a certain way, or why I responded. And some of them just weren't healthy themselves. So when I turned 18, I just aged out of the system and walked away from that family because it was safer for me to be away from them, to sadly be with them.
Wow, what amazing testimony. What was the saving grace for you to come to Christ?
Honestly, Christ is always with us, even when we don't realize it. So looking back at my years growing up, I can see where God was there. My first memory of something to do with God and Jesus was I was living with my grandmother. I was about 7 years old. She was not a religious woman at all. And there was a woman, a pastor's daughter, who was going around the neighborhood and inviting people to their church. And she came to our door, and I hid in the hallway looking around. And she invited my grandmother. My grandmother said, "No, but you can take my granddaughter." She saw it as free childcare, but the Lord was working. And that's where I was introduced to God and started to have just a little about a year of being introduced to church and to God and to Jesus. And it started planting the seeds. And there was moments like that through other homes and other school relationships and families I'd encounter. And then when I was in college, there was a young woman at college as well who I worked with. And she had this amazing community that they brought together, an ecumenical community at the university. And they just kept inviting me. And they kept inviting me, and I would do stuff and hang out, but my heart was being softened. And in that same time, I really was making some poor life choices and struggling, and finally hit the lowest I could be and said, I need to change this. And my head was, I need family, because that's what I haven't had. And so I reached out to my biological father's family, who I'd never really known, but I had some information on, and found them, and eventually got to meet them in person, and come to find out they were all followers of Christ. And for a whole week, at first my reaction was, these crazy Christian people, I'm so much cooler. And then I went a week of them being from not knowing me at all to meeting me, hearing my story, and loving on me. But it was more than that. They had something different about the way their life was, how they lived it, how they approached it. And by the end of the week, I wanted that. I wanted to know it, and I could see that it was God. And I gave my life to the Lord because of them.
Amazing. So this month is a National Foster Care Awareness Month. So what does this month personally mean to you?
To me, it means we're able to give a voice to the voiceless. So much of time for kids in foster care, they might have a voice to someone, they don't have a full voice themselves. And so even here at Focus this month, we're going to be releasing in the coming week videos that we did with 4 former foster youth. I'm a little older out of that group. We brought in some younger, fun people, but to share what their journeys were and to share what made a difference, from extreme cases to just, it didn't work out with their families and they moved on and needed to be in care. But it's really about giving a voice and sharing that voice for everyone out there to hear. In the Bible, God calls us to love our neighbors. That's our greatest commandment. And a lot of times we think about the people very close to it, not those extended neighbors that are kind of the least of these, the ones we may not want to see or we don't know how to help. And really, this month is giving a voice and understanding that you can do something. You may not be called to foster. You may not be called to adopt from foster care, but you can do something. Can you pray? can you start to have a little bit more education and learning about foster care and about what's going on, that there's over 400,000 children in foster care today, that there's families, there's kids sleeping, child welfare offices and hotels, in crowded homes, and homes that need to have parents with a little bit more training to help with the trauma that they've gone through. And there's people listening that could step up and be that. And so just this month is about sharing those voices and experiences and the need that's out there.
I wonder if anybody else is wondering, since, the amazing testimony of you going through foster care, finding Christ through family and everything else. How did you end up doing stuff with Focus on the Family?
Let's give God all the credit, first of all, because this wasn't my path. I didn't get a social work degree. My background is in nonprofit management and business and things. I didn't know my skills could be used in this portion. And God brought me to Focus in a different role, and this opportunity opened up, and I was invited to join the team because of my experience and my passion and my talents. So now I'm able to run our program and share that. And then my husband and I are actually foster and adoptive parents as well. So we're on this side of it from the experience, so I can kind of speak into both things and share that in my daily life.
What would you like our listeners to know that something is significant about this month, and how should they approach it?
I would say the significance is to know that there's over 400,000 children in foster care today. That those are 400,000 children who have been removed from the only world that they know, that they have been transported into a new place. It's safe. It should be safe and good, but it's hard for them. And that the first thing they could do is pray. I mean, as a family myself, as a foster family, we need prayer. We actually have a whole prayer team around us that circles around us. And when different things are going on, we can call them up. Last week, I unfortunately tore ligaments in my ankle, and chaos ensued. We had school pickup and sports games, and how am I going to get around? How are we going to do meals? And that group surrounded me. So you can do something. Pray about where God is leading you, and see if your heart's open to take that next step.
If you're just tuning in right now, I'm speaking to Helen Richardson from Focus on the Family, sharing her journey of going through the foster care system as a young child. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And, you going through that, you being a little girl, do you remember the tragedy? Do you remember all that stuff that happened to you when you were a little girl, and how has God healed that?
I remember some things. I remember when my mom died, she had a heart attack. We were in a parked car, thankfully, and she was coughing, and that cough coincided with a heart attack, and that happened right there in a Denny's parking lot. I remember when my dad had his accident and was in a hospital, I have a memory of a man, and I was told later in life, oh, that was your father. I remember it not being a good, safe place, but I also remember a foster family. This is one of my favorite memories, and I love to share it because it was a simple thing of sitting down at the counter for food, and I was supposed to eat cauliflower, and I didn't want to, but she stopped and put butter on it and gave me a little saying about how sometimes a little butter makes things better. And as a small child, that made such a difference, and butter is delicious, we know it, but a small act, and you don't realize how much of an impact it's going to make. I remember hard times when I was with my kinship family, and they were sadly abusive, and trying to get help at school and having say, hey, something's not safe at home, and having some people believe and trying to intervene. It just kind of all balances out. There's good times and there's bad times, but the greatest thing in all of it is that I can look back and see how God was there protecting. And we serve a God who sometimes allows bad things to happen, but just as he said to Joseph, he's going to, have a new plan for that, and he's going to redeem what the locusts have eaten, and that's what he's doing. He's redeeming my life. I'm redeemed in him, and we're trying to make a difference for others now.
Well, it's been a blessing speaking with you, hearing about your foster care journey. Any other details that I left out that our listeners can find out more details about Foster Care Awareness Month?
They're welcome to check out waitnomore.org. It's our website for our foster care and adoption program at Focus on the Family. We have a prayer guide this month about how you can, it's a free download, you can walk through different areas to pray about the foster care system and what you could be doing, as well as just other great resources that we provide for free too. waitnomore.org.
Once again, that was Helen Richardson from Focus on the Family, sharing her story how she was placed in the foster care system at a young age. She is from Focus on the Family, and May is National Foster Care Month. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of a staff or management of a station. I'm Anissa Porticelli for News and Public Affairs.